Within the last 3 days, I've ordered a $200 consumer device and an over $4,000 professional device. Which one do you think I might regret purchasing? Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. One of the most exciting things to come out of CES, and sadly I missed seeing them in person. There are just so many different companies there. I only found out about it, ironically, once I got back home again. But that is the Rabbit R1 coming from the company Rabbit.tech. And I will of course leave links in the description to Rabbit and to Apple. If you don't know what Apple is, it's apple.com, so that's pretty easy to find. Anyway, I want to talk about Rabbit today, and I also want to talk about the Apple Vision Pro because these are two different visions of the future, and I think here we have a David and Goliath situation, and I think David might actually beat Goliath. The first thing is the price, right? The Rabbit is a $200 device. There is no subscription assigned to it, and you get a year of perplexity if you're one of the first 100,000 to order, and you better do that quickly because they are already sold out of the first 50,000 units. They're on there. They may already be close to sold out of their second 50,000 units. So if I were you, I would get on ordering the Rabbit R1 quickly if you want to get that free perplexity subscription. And anyway, that's worth $200 on its own right. So even if the device itself sucks, you still get a year of perplexity, which is kind of a AI-based counterpart to Google, and it's really, really useful. I've actually talked about that on my channel previously. I find it to be a very useful search engine helper, whatever you want to call it. It's like a new AI-based version of what Google was, 20 years ago. Google was an amazing new technology and it was like super cool. Now it feels a little bit dated compared to things like Perplexity. So first of all, we have the keynote from Jesse Liu, and I will leave a link to that in the description as well. But you can see here, he says at the beginning before introducing everything. And by the way, this has an early Apple, like a Steve Jobs sort of feel to it. Not perfectly slick. It's a little bit amateurish, but it feels like Apple in the early 1980s. And I love that. And I also love the fact that it's called Rabbit. Again, kind of hearkening back to the original Apple. And that's why this is a really cool comparison. We've got corporate 2024 Apple, and we've got, non-corporate 1984 Apple with Steve Jobs announcing the Macintosh or something. So very interesting contrast across 40 years. But Rabbit, kind of a cute, furry little creature, sort of like an apple. Apples aren't scary. Apples are like things you can eat. So if you don't know, the whole reason that Steve Jobs picked Apple to be the name of Apple Computer was, first of all, because he worked in an apple orchard. But second, they were looking for something that was not scary. It was very not International Business Machines, IBM, which was the big behemoth at the time. So the idea was to be friendly and to be approachable and all of that kind of stuff. So that's why it's called Apple Computer. And so here you see the same kind of idea. You've got Rabbit. You've got something, it's like, oh, who doesn't like a rabbit? They're cute, they're furry, they eat carrots and things like that. So I really, really like this contrast across 40 plus years in seeing what is effectively the original Apple back in the late 70s and early 80s, that thing versus the corporate Apple that is right now that produces very, very slick devices and everything. And if you look at the construction of the Vision Pro, Tim Cook released a video, well, Apple released it. Tim Cook posted it on X. It's an absolute wonder seeing how it's built and all of that stuff. But there's something kind of lovely about a low-cost device that it may or may not work perfectly. I have a feeling it's going to be sort of like the first generation iPhone when it comes out. It's going to be a little clunky. There'll probably be mistakes. It probably won't work perfectly, but I believe it's the future. I think even more than the mixed reality AR, VR headset from Apple, I think that an AI OS is really where things are headed. And that's the cool part about this. So here we have new foundation model, which is kind of an AI first operating system. That's the important part of it. And we have a consumer mobile device, which is of course the Rabbit R1. And here you can see Jesse, the thing behind him says, mission, create the simplest computer possible. So the idea here is to create something that will operate and basically just talk to you like a person. And of course, here he's showing the competition, which is traditional at this point, which is crazy to think about. It's only about 14 or 15 years old, but traditional smartphones, your blank slab that has a whole bunch of apps on it that you have to go dig through, and you have to take many, many actions in order to do anything. So he does something where he, calls an Uber at one point. And if you do it on a phone, it's like you got to find the app someplace in your hundreds of apps and things, or you do the search and you search for Uber, pop open Uber, then it says like, where are you located? Here you are. You have to type in where you want to go. You tell it that stuff. It then asks you some questions. You say yes, you double click on it to confirm that you want to actually pay, all of those sort of steps. It doesn't seem like that much, but if you think about the amount of friction in every single app that you use, you can start to see that accomplishing things over the day, every single day that you use your phone, There are a lot of wasted steps and a lot of brain cycles you're expending attempting to do all of these things that could be done more effectively now and really not even a year ago, right? We have to have the advent of large language models and the development of these sorts of things to be able to make this possible. But now we're getting to a point where we can have an intelligent assistant that can actually do things for us. And Jesse and the Rabbit team call this the LAM as opposed to large language model or LLM. They call it the large action model, which is, I like it. Market speak a little bit, but the idea is that when you tell Rabbit to do something, it does it. It doesn't action. It doesn't just right back in text. So let's jump into the video here where Jesse is talking about how traditional, like 15-month-old large language models actually work. So when you use something like ChatGPT to actually perform a useful action.
That the natural language-based experience is the path forward. However, where these assistants struggle is still getting things done.
Okay, so that's the important part, right? So we're talking about large language models. They can do text, but they can't do actions. So he's going to show a little demo of how that works or doesn't work in ChatGPT.
For example, if you go to the ChatGPT and use their Expedia plugin to book a ticket, it can suggest options, but ultimately cannot assist you in completing the booking process from start to finish. Things like ChatGPT are extremely good at understanding your intentions, but could be better at triggering actions.
So really, this is the crux of the Rabbit R1 here. We're going from large language models, the ability of these things to be able to talk to you and tell you about stuff, to the ability of the Rabbit R1 to be able to actually perform an action for you. And that is a pretty significant difference.
Another hot topic is a field of research around what they call agents. It has caught the eye of many open source projects and productivity software companies. What remains to be solved is for these agents to perform tasks end-to-end, accurately and speedily. The problem is forcing a model to perform a task it is not designed for, whether for a language model to reason about web page using super prompts or screenshots. We have yet to produce an agent as good as users simply clicking the buttons.
So again, if you think about this compared to your phone, you've got a phone, right? Your iPhone or your Android or whatever it is. You are the agent and you call up the apps and you perform actions on those apps. That's the kind of thing that you're doing here. The human is the agent. The point that they're trying to make is why not have an AI assistant, an AI agent be that agent that works for you. So you kind of abstract yourself a level out. So you've got your apps, and you've got an AI agent, and you've got you that's sort of like the CEO of the company or something, right? It's like, book me some tickets to Japan, and it just does it for you, right? So you don't have to do all of the legwork. You don't have to do the heavy lifting in order to make something like that happen.
To fulfill our vision of a delightful, intuitive companion, we must go beyond a piece of complex software. We want it to be in the hands of everyone. So, we first set out to fundamentally understand how computer apps are structured and, more importantly, how humans interact with them. We wanted to find a way for our AI to trigger actions on behalf of users across all environments. We want it to be universal, not just a Chrome plugin or a limited set of apps, but everything: iOS, Android, and desktop. These applications share something in common: the interface. They all have a user interface. So, at a philosophical level, if we can make an AI trigger actions on any kind of interface, just like a human would, we will solve the problem. This insight led us to create the large action model.
So here's where we get into a little bit of stickiness, and I don't have the insight into exactly how this works. There is some indication that the Rabbit R1, the device itself, might be interfacing with your phone to be able to perform the actions, but I'm not actually sure about that. So this is one of those things where I can't wait to get one in my own hands. And actually, Rabbit, if you guys want to send me just a loaner or something like that to do a pre-release about this, it looks like the first ones are going to be coming in sort of like the late March, maybe early April timeframe. And hopefully I was early enough to get one of the very early ones. But if you guys have if you guys have loaners, I would love to take a look at one earlier. But it's a little unclear whether what this thing is doing is acting as an interface with your phone. So you have to carry the Rabbit R1 around and your phone at the same time, or whether the Rabbit R1 is actually functioning on its own. At the $200 price tag, I would not be at all upset about it if the R1 was actually interfacing with your phone, but it becomes a little more cumbersome in that case because you've got to carry that around plus your phone all the time if you want to utilize them. So we will see how that stuff goes, and if people have insight into this that I don't know about at this point, definitely let me know in the comments.
It is a new foundational model that understands and executes human intentions on computers, driven by our research in neural symbolic systems. With a large action model, we fundamentally find a solution to the challenges that apps, APIs, or agents face. We solve it with interfaces. LAM can learn any interfaces from any software, regardless of which platform they're running on. In short, the large language model understands what you say, but the large action model gets things done.
So that's basically it there. The large language model can write you a paper or respond to something or say, here is a list of flights. The whole point of this is the large action model can actually book the flight for you or interact with these interfaces. And again, whether it's utilizing your phone as an intermediary or not, this is really, really interesting stuff because essentially the large action model is coming in here and it's learning how to navigate an interface like a human does. So again, if you're looking at something like Uber and there's a little bar at the top that says, where do you want to go to? And you click that bar and you type in, I want to go to the grocery store or something, right? Whatever that thing is, that's the sort of thing that this large action model is learning how to do. And this is the real beauty of an LAM. It's the idea here is that you're able to interface with anything because the LAM is learning about how to navigate the world and how to navigate these interfaces. So you don't have to rewrite the entire internet and app store in order for this thing to work because it learns how to work like a human. That's the sort of genius light bulb moment that went off for these guys. This is really, really impressive stuff. And again, I don't know, it could be super clunky. It might not work very well, but it's sure from the demos looks like it does work well. And the fact of the matter is, this is the kind of thing that a multimodal large language model and or something else will be able to learn. This is exactly how neural networks function. And it's a question of training data and things like that. Sure, that's problematic and everything, but obviously they figured out how to do that and how to get a data pipeline. And this is very exciting stuff.
We use LAM to bring AI from words to action. Finally, we can build a computer that in addition to understanding what you're trying to say, can actually help you do things on your behalf. We've packed the large action model into an advanced RabbitOS operating system. It is built for real-time interactions between you and the Rabbit, powered by LAM. Large action models concept and test results are so powerful that we decided to make a one-of-a-kind mobile device. Introducing R1, your pocket companion.
And so there you have it. It looks like a kid's toy, but apparently it's an amazing piece of kit. You notice that it has a push to talk on the side so that you don't have to wake it up. So you do have to have it out of your pocket or something. I could see eventually creating some sort of a watch interface or something like that. So you could utilize it while it was in your pocket, but basically it's push to talk. You talk to it. It's got a scroll wheel, a touch screen, a camera on it. And it looks like it over here has some sort of like SD card or something like that. So you can increase the amount of memory, and it looks like a USB-C charger here. So the push to talk on the side, you can't see, but this is relatively small, fits in the palm of your hand kind of idea. And the hardware design is from Teenage Engineering, which is not a company that I'm very familiar with, but apparently if you're a millennial, you'll love them. So anyway, so it has that little bit childish, playful sort of look, soft around the edges, but the orange color, I think, is the main thing that's just a little bit like, woo, it's a bit much. So eventually I could see them coming out with more muted colors or something, or maybe they're just going to want to keep it a very, very playful type of interface. But it has, again, to compare it back to Apple again, it has that sort of feel of the 1990 iMacs, the lickable colored ones and everything. So I really kind of like it. Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of orange in the world, not that bright of an orange, but I do think this is going to be really cool. And certainly it's going to be very, attractive. If you pull it out of your pocket, you push to talk and you tell it to book you an Uber ride to someplace and the thing goes like, here it is, confirm. and you just click it, and people are going to notice, right? They're going to hear you talking. They're going to see this orange object. They're going to say, what is that? So it's going to have its own sort of viral marketing ability because of the fact that it is very bright and colorful, and it does some things that are very different. And one of the demos, I'm not going to play this entire thing because it's 22 minutes long in its own right, but one of the demos that Jesse shows is a demo of him saying, I want an Uber ride to such and such place, and it says, here's an idea. And it says, no, wait, I've got 6 adults, and we're going to the airport, and we've got 3 pieces of luggage. And then the Rabbit automatically reconfigures, goes with an Uber XL, because of course that's the larger vehicle, says you can fit all the people in this thing. Do you want to confirm that? So the only thing you have to do as a user is confirm any type of like monetary action or something. So if you wanted to plan, you again, get me a flight from here to Japan or something like that, it will give you a list of options based on your criteria, but you of course pick it and finally make the decision to purchase it. So it won't purchase things on its own, which is, I think, for the best. I don't really want it making that kind of decision for me, but the rest of it can do all of the steps to get to what it needs to do in order to get to the point of you purchasing something, or if it's not purchasing, if it's just researching or something, it can do all of that too. It can send emails. So, the screen is not that large, but if you're like, oh, please write me something, or, do some research and give me a bunch of links or something, it can easily create an email and send you an email so it's on your desktop. So that's David. Let's move on to Goliath. We have introducing the Apple Vision Pro, Apple's first spatial computer. It is a thing of beauty. If you watch the construction video, it is it's a thing of beauty just watching it be made. But you can see it's got headband. It's got I think 27 instruments on it. It's got LiDAR. It's got cameras. It's got microphones. It's got speakers. It's got everything you can imagine, and it's even got an OLED display here on the front, which displays like a vision of your eyes when you're looking around, so that it looks like you're actually looking and talking with other people. So it's a more advanced version of Google's glasses. Google had this, around 2010, it was a while back, but they had glasses that were very clunky and cumbersome so that you could look through them. But most VR glasses, AR glasses, do not have a pass-through on the front, so you can't see them. So Apple has spent, I think, somewhere around 10 years and who knows how many billions of dollars creating this Apple Vision with a vision of mixed reality, of being able to do things in reality and to be able to play games and watch movies and work in professional environments. And Scott and I have specifically talked about how the Vision Pro is going to be an incredible professional tool. The question is it going to take off in the consumer market? And of course, the biggest reason it's going to struggle taking off in the consumer market is the price. It is literally 20 times the cost of the Rabbit. So yeah, it starts around $3,400, but once you get a little extra memory, and I got some prescriptions for the inside of the thing, it was over $4,000 for me to purchase the Vision Pro. And of course, the Vision Pro is running on Vision OS, but that's basically just the iOS, the iPhone OS that has been recast for this sort of virtual environment. Now, everybody that's used it says it's absolutely fantastic and it works amazingly. But when you think about it, this is traditional type software. This is like a big virtual desktop in front of you, and you can pinch and you can do all these amazing things. So it's got really, really cool tricks. But what it doesn't have is what the Rabbit has, which is an AI-first, AI-based OS, essentially. It's like the whole thing is based around large language models, large action models, and AI first. And what that means is, while the Apple Vision Pro looks spectacular and costs a spectacular amount of money, it basically took my entire budget. Apple is actually cannibalizing their own sales in terms of me, because I was going to purchase a new Mac Studio this year, but that was my entire budget for the Mac Studio. So it's like, well, guess I'm getting these things instead. But basically, it costs a spectacular amount. It looks spectacular, all that stuff, but it's also kind of old school. It's pre-AI, and I think there's going to be a dividing line. And the Rabbit R1, even if it's not a perfect device, I don't expect it to be. It's going to be a Generation 1 device. It'll probably be clunky. Hopefully, OS updates and, software updates and things like that will make it better and better over time. But I expect it'll be the Rabbit R2 or R3 before we see it really take off and figure out exactly what it needs to look like and function like. But there's 2 main reasons why I'm not going to regret purchasing the Rabbit no matter what. Number 1, it was $200, so whatever. And you got the Perplexity subscription too, so I got $200 back on that subscription, because I would have probably gotten that anyway. And number 2, I feel very strongly that this is the future. This is sort of an iPhone moment for AI-based things. This is, 2024, people will say, oh, that was the moment when we saw the new kind of OS that came into existence. Wasn't perfect in 2024. things needed to kind of evolve. And again, if you think back to the original iPhone in 2007, 2008, it was pretty clunky, didn't work particularly well, but you could see the future. You could see where things were going. And if you go all the way back to 1984 with the original Macintosh, which I spent all of my money in college on, literally like every penny I had, I spent on an original Macintosh, 128K RAM, and a dot matrix printer that was over $5,000. I think like $5,200. So, crazy amounts of money for a college student. But I could see that graphical interface, the graphical UI, all of that stuff was the future. So I've had a reasonable track record. I mean, I waited in line for the original iPhone when it came out, me and my son. So we could only get one each, so we got two. So we got two of the original iPhones, and even though it was clunky, I was like, this is the future. And in 1984, with the original Macintosh, I was like, this is the future. And the interesting thing is here that I actually personally believe that the R1 is the future, and the Vision Pro, while beautiful, is going to be, may or may not be the future. I think it might actually feel like a little bit of a relic of the past. Now, could Apple eventually bolt on some really significant AI stuff? Yeah. So the hardware itself is flexible because you can always upload new software and everything. So honestly, if I was Tim Cook right now, I would be trying to buy Rabbit. I would be something like, I'll take you guys. And I would give them all the money they wanted, and I would completely turn them loose. But what I would do is I would then integrate this into the Vision, and then we would be talking about something, because an AI-centric thing that was a full agent that you could actually interact with in a holistic manner would be, that would be the incredible kind of thing that I can only imagine people happening. But in terms of the two, I really feel like the Rabbit R1 is more the future than the Vision Pro. And finally, if you don't believe me, I came across this when I was researching this. I'd already thought of the topic, but it's like basically says the exact same thing. Daryl Etherington says, forget the Apple Vision Pro, Rabbit R1 is 2024's most exciting launch yet. And the subtitle, of course, is the most interesting part. Apple is doing everything it can to make VR happen, but a tiny startup has a better vision of the future. So of course, I'll leave a link to this in the description, but I'll just pull out a couple of paragraphs here. But first, look at these two. Which one is cuter and more approachable and more adorable? I really think it's the one on the left. I think the Rabbit is the device that I would pick up and go for first before the other one, because I would just find it more appealing. So here he says, unlike the Apple Vision Pro, which looks like the lavish, overslick, encumbered bit of technology's past masquerading as technology's future that it is, the Rabbit R1 has a pared down, satisfying economy that I think comes much closer to what future generations want from their tech. On the functionality side, Vision Pro is an exercise in UI oversaturation. The R1 aims to be as close as you can currently get to having no UI at all. So again, Daryl mirrors my thoughts almost exactly here. It's like you've got this kind of past masquerading as the future, and you've got the real future sitting there. So I think it's just amazing and very pointed that we've got the pre-release of both of these things happening within a week of each other. And just one more paragraph here. There are tons of questions remaining regarding how the Rabbit R1 will work in real-world situations, and I certainly have them too, and how Rabbit's business model, which so far seems to only involve selling individual units at a flat price of $199 without any recurring subscription fees, will work. But the Rabbit R1 already has the kind of organic hype that would-be competitors like Humane AI Pin wished they'd been able to drum up with their carefully tuned but massively overblown protracted promo campaign. So to wrap things up, we have the Apple Vision Pro, which is kind of the culmination of a very long push towards AR and VR that has really sputtered. 10 or 15 years ago, I would have been like, yeah, that's the future. That's the way things are headed. But now I'm not so convinced of that. If anyone can't make the future happen and move that direction, I mean, Apple is a behemoth. It has put billions of dollars and a very long time in research and development on this. And if anybody is going to be able to push us into the mixed reality future, it's going to be Apple. And science fiction has predicted this is going to happen, so maybe it will. But honestly, I feel like this little tiny $200 Rabbit device is the future. This is the way things are going to go. I've had a reasonable track record. I predicted in 1984 that the graphical UI with the mouse was going to be the way to go. And by the way, at the time, most people said no to that. And in 2007, I was right there ordering the Apple iPhone, and I was like, yep, this is the way to go. And weird fact, back to Apple again, I am one of the very few people in history that ever got a grant from Apple. In the mid-90s, they were really, really struggling with their hardware and everything, and they actually gave me a free Quadra, Mac Quadra, plus a couple of very nice monitors, because I said I would build them some HTML HTML, and I would build out some websites in 1994, 1995. And they were desperate to kind of, take on this new role. This was pre-Steve Jobs returning, and they were just like casting around and trying to figure out how they were going to remain relevant anymore. And so I applied for a grant and said that I would make websites and everything and show off the power of the internet way back in the early days of this. So I've had a reasonable track record of predicting these future things. And my prediction right now is that David is going to kill Goliath. I think that Apple's Vision Pro is going to be reasonably successful in the professional market. There are markets for this. I've discussed it, virtual reality things, making factories, construction sites, you name it. But I think in terms of mass market adoption, the Rabbit R1 is definitely the way to go. I mean, they're working on 100,000 pre-orders for a tiny little startup company that nobody's heard of before. And you've got Apple. I don't know. I mean, maybe they haven't sold 100,000 Vision Pros at this point. There would be no way to know because they don't tell you these kinds of numbers. But this is the kind of thing where at $4,000 a pop, I don't know how many people are going to be pre-ordering the Vision Pro. So that's my take on all of this. I'd be very interested to know what you all think about that. Definitely let me know in the comments. And of course, I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.